Welcome to Talent Unfiltered. Located at the intersection of innovation and all things talent. Talent Unfiltered is presented by HireWorks. HireWorks, talent forward. And by Aon. Aon, empower results. Now, here is your host, Ron Godier.
It's Monday, March 23rd, 2020, and you are looking at a shot of downtown Chicago. It is a surreal picture in a very surreal world, and one that is much different than what we lived in last week at this time. We'll have more on that in just a few moments. For now, welcome to Talent Unfiltered, presented by HireWorks. I am your host, Ron Godier, and let's get started. Now, it might seem weird to you to continue to do podcasts. I actually think that this is one of those things, at least for me, that allows me to stay grounded. It allows me to focus on the idea that there will be an end to this, that this is not going to go on forever. That doesn't mean that it isn't difficult right now. That doesn't mean that people aren't suffering right now, both from a health perspective and from an economic perspective. This has tremendous, tremendous impact to what happens to us as individuals. Am I going to be, people are asking questions like, am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Can I pay my bills? What happens if I get sick? And there are a lot of questions that we look to leaders to be able to answer. And I don't think we're at a place yet where everybody has enough answers to give you anything sure. So what we can do is we can have conversations about things that we can do once this is over. And that's really what I believe this is about. This is about how do we get to that place when this is over, because it will be over at some point. That's why I'm really excited about our guest today. His name is Marinus van Driel. He is a partner, an associate partner at Aon. And in his normal everyday job, under normal circumstances, he talks to clients about how to use data to make better hiring decisions, to assess talent more effectively, and to maybe find talent in places that you hadn't expected. Today, I want to take that data expertise and I want to turn it on its head. And I want to talk about solutions that, or maybe not solutions, but at least suggestions about how you as a human, as a worker, as a business owner can begin to think about how to navigate this particular situation. Now, before we get started, you need to know that you can connect with the show on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat. The show is available for you to listen to on Spotify, iTunes, Buzzsprout, and SoundCloud. There's also a video version of the show on YouTube. You just need to search Talent Unfiltered on any of those platforms. You can also email the show if you have questions or show suggestions at showinfo@talentunfiltered.com. And the links to our social media and our platforms are in the comments section down below. We hope that you will take the time to connect with us. And if you like what we do today, then like, subscribe, share, turn on the notification buttons on whatever platform you happen to be listening to us on. So without further ado, I want to bring in Marinus van Driel. As I said, he is an associate partner with Aon, someone who specializes in data, and data from the standpoint of how we make better hiring decisions, how we find talent, and how we assess that talent. Marinus, thanks so much for joining us today, man. How are you doing? How's the family? Everybody okay?
Yeah, no, we're doing good. We're doing good, Ron. We had a little bit of a scare here earlier in the week. Had some cold-like symptoms, but we snapped out of it, and everything's good again. So I think as with everybody right now, everybody's just kind of have a heightened level of concern when you catch a sniffle, and that's kind of where we were. But thankfully, we're all good.
Sure. It's terrifying, right? Because we think in one sense, it's we thought it only affected people over a certain age. And then there was the idea that it was affecting people who were younger. And then there was the whole idea that, well, wait a second, this could be not just passed through contact or droplets, but that, there's even talk now that this is can be conveyed by spray. I've heard stuff where COVID-19 can actually remain airborne for a number of minutes. I've heard ranging estimates from a few minutes to 30 minutes, but I just think it's an ever-evolving situation, and I just don't think we know what to expect yet. How is your family handling this? Because when you and I talked at the beginning of the week, you mentioned that you and your wife had both experienced symptoms of this. How did the kids respond to that?
You know, it was a very strange and surreal feeling because we were really concerned, obviously, about not only us but our daughter as well, and she knows what's going on, but she was really great about it. She's been absolutely amazing at just being home, you know, during this time as well, because school's out for spring break at the moment, and she just understood that we needed a little bit more personal space in between all of us, and she was very accommodating. I think that the weirdest moment happened last night. My mom lives about 10 minutes away from us, just right up the road here, and we had to take her some things because obviously she's elderly and doesn't want to get out of the home. And we went and we dropped off a grocery bag at our house and had to stay 6 feet apart. My daughter just said, "Well, Oma, I just want to give you a hug," and she just said, "It's so weird that I can't give you a hug right now." And I think that just kind of like really made it real for me, you know, that there is, I mean, obviously I knew from my mom, she's isolated, but now it's like, there was like a very like real physical sort of like manifestation of that isolation, like right in front of us. And, you know, so we're okay, but I am really concerned about the older folks in our lives, like my mom, my in-laws, you know, our neighbors. And living here in Florida, obviously, we've got a very, very high concentration of folks that are in that demographic that are more impacted by the coronavirus.
Well, my prayers are with you, my friend. You're somebody that I've gotten to know over the last year. And, you know, I think about you and I think about my other friends around the country, people that I know in different parts of the world. I have a number of friends in London. In fact, one of them is going to be part of the show next week, a gentleman by the name of Hung Lee. And so I hear reports from all over the country and all over the world, and it's terrifying. While I think most of us are going to survive that just sounds callous to say it that way. Most of us are going to survive, right? Mm-hmm. You look at the rate of increase, the trajectory of things that are going on, and the way that people are already beginning to respond to this. I hope that we find our better angels and we find ways to be the best that we can be, not just here in the States, but in other parts of the world. But I'm glad that you're okay. It seems odd in this time, really, and in some ways to talk about business. But I do think for the consumers of this show, business is a concern. Some of the things that we're going to run into are concerning. And because of your background in assessments and in data, I think it's interesting to talk about the impact of COVID-19, of the coronavirus, on business in three different ways. The human impact, just the straight up human impact, what happens to people, how they think about it, the data they get or don't get, as it may be. The worker impact, what happens to you as a worker? Because we see on Friday, there were unemployment claims were reported at that they expected 2.25 million unemployment claims. The gains from the stock market of the last 3 years are for all intents and purposes, they're gone. So we need to talk about that. Then we also need to talk about companies, because small companies are going to struggle. They already are. Big companies have some things like continuity planning. They have succession planning. They have things in their arsenal that allow them to manage these a little bit differently. But ultimately, they're going to have challenges too. So let me just start kind of right at the top. And given your background and the things and the work that you do with companies all over the place, talk to me about trends, what you're seeing from organizations in Aon's practice, and how they are responding to this outbreak, this pandemic, and some of the things that maybe people who are in smaller companies can take with them as potential strategies on how they might address it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. You know, and I can just kind of speak from my personal perspective, being within Aon's talent practice. I think there's been a lot of really amazing steps taken very quickly to help sure that folks are okay. I think Aon, being a risk organization, has been uniquely positioned in the sense of having been prepared for something like this for some time by having a workforce that is capable of working virtually. I think that was one of the things that has really benefited us as an organization. So being able to have folks work from home and still basically provide the services that we provide to our clients and customers from remote locations or from virtual platforms or whatever the case may be, and just immediately within our group as well. I think one of the things that we've done very quickly here over the last probably, I would say, about a month or so is we figured out how to virtualize processes, for instance, that were in person. So we do a lot of work in terms of development centers, for instance, helping employees develop their skill sets, identify where their areas of strengths are and where their areas of opportunities are. And a lot of that work requires in-person interaction at times, where folks are brought together in a physical location, they go through exercises, there are folks that are guiding participants through exercises and such. And we have now effectively moved the majority of those things onto virtual platforms, and our clients who are engaging in that type of work with us have been absolutely astounding by being accepting of it and realizing that would be a good thing to do. So I think just in summary, for us, just the capability of being able to virtualize the work that we do has been really empowering. And I think the other thing that I've just seen across the board, not only with Aon, but outside of Aon, is the importance of leadership. And a lot of leaders have really shown a lot of compassion, a lot of strength in terms of leading through these issues that everybody's facing now. And I think empathy is probably one of the most important things at this stage. And I can share just from a personal level, our leadership team at Aon has shown nothing but the greatest level of empathy for every employee, and really have put a lot of steps in place to make sure that everybody feels supported.
Let me ask you this, because you touched on a couple of things there that I think are super interesting. Last week we had Lou Adler on the show.
Right, yeah.
Lou's just a wonderful guy. We had a great time, but it was right at the beginning of this, right? And we had not seen the explosion of the trajectory, I guess is the right way to say that. We hadn't really seen this trajectory of new cases of the virus, but we talked about being able to virtualize work at some level, more from a pure talent perspective. We also talked about remote work, and I have a contention that one of the positive outcomes of this, at least from a business aspect, I'm not talking about human aspect, I'm not talking about the impact of to human beings, but that one of the positive outcomes of this from a business standpoint may be that companies who did not see remote work as a viable option will look at that and realize it's not really the scary big bad they had thought it was, and that with the right preparation, there can be some real benefit out of doing that. In this case, I think the benefit is that workers feel more safe. They're in an environment that they're familiar with, and it is less stressful for them to try to commute and go to and from work for those who are still readily employed, right? And I'd love to get your take on that, to see if you think that's going to influence thinking after this, because I think the world we go back to when this is over will potentially be much different than what we deal with today from a working corporate standpoint.
I totally agree. I think for work that can be done virtually, I think there will just be a natural inclination to sort of trust the systems and the processes and the things and the capabilities that we have now will support that. But I think where I'm really concerned, what the day after this is over looks like, are for folks who don't do the type of work that is computerized or virtual. Folks that are in the service industry, or folks that are in the patient care, healthcare industry, or any other kind of a role where there is a requirement where you have to interact with people, or where you have to be outside of the home. I think the implications for folks in those lines of works will likely be much more pronounced than it would be for folks who are are office workers or knowledge workers, if you will.
You know, it's interesting because I want to stay with this subject for just a second. We talk sometimes, you and I have had these conversations, and I think that for many times when we think of businesses, we think of Kraft, we think of Aon, we think of Shell Oil, we think of all these large organizations, but 50% of America's business, of our gross domestic product, is driven by very, very small businesses, companies that have 10, 15 employees, right? Not huge organizations. How do you translate these concepts that you're talking about, and how do you give comfort to the person who doesn't have that infrastructure? What are the things that they should be thinking about? Maybe not necessarily a viable solution, but what should they be looking to in order to try to continue to deliver business? And I want to put a caveat on that I think we're not talking about restaurants, right? We're talking about that small computer firm who maybe didn't have the infrastructure, or that 3-person professional service startup. These folks probably have some idea, but they would benefit from the knowledge of someone coming out of your background. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Just applying what we know that we apply at scale for large organizations, and distilling that down in a very tangible and actionable way for smaller organizations is sometimes a challenge. But I do think there are a lot of really good insights that we can share. And one of the topics that I've been chatting a lot about just internally with my colleagues and a lot of our clients is this notion of workforce resilience and what that means, and workforce agility and what that means. And I think even for small organizations, that's something that's really, really critical at this point in time, is thinking about, well, how can you, in a way, make your organization adaptable if you're a business owner? What is it that the talent that you have in your business, whether you have 5 people working with you, whether you have 10 people or 20 or 30, or for argument's sake, 1,000 people working with you, what is it that you can do to make sure that your workforce remains agile and resilient in the face of things like what we're facing now? I mean, 3 weeks ago, this was something that was on the periphery. We didn't really think about this as being even remotely possible, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we've now seen is that the organizations that have resilient talent are the ones that will come through this entire experience in the best way possible. So I think for leaders, there's a question to answer there. It's like, how can you sort of like future-proof your talent in your organization? And I think it comes down to one, making sure that folks have opportunities to reskill or upskill themselves in other areas. And the reason I think that's important, particularly for smaller organizations, is there will be opportunities that will come from the realities that we face right now to rejig or change the way that your business operates, or focus on different things that you can do. I think also something else that leaders can do as well is also start looking for talent in places you may not have looked for talent before. What we're seeing now is that there are a lot of folks that are being displaced from one industry, and they're looking for work. And there may be sources of talent you've never considered before, and that could really, really be something that can help you bolster your capability to do the work that you need to do. So for instance, we're seeing obviously a lot of folks in the hospitality and services industries really being affected in a very adverse way at the moment. And those folks are looking for jobs. So one of the things that we're thinking about now within the context of my team is how we can connect people that have skills and have capabilities that come from one industry to job opportunities in other areas, and using data to link people up in a very, very, very clear way. And I think that type of thinking is something that we'll see more of, and that organizations can engage in more often. And then lastly, I think just on the individual level too, I think for folks that are in a position where their job has maybe been either subjected to a layoff, or folks are subject to furlough. I think that the key thing at the individual level is looking at ways in which you can potentially reskill yourself right now, looking at ways in which you can adapt and find other opportunities, and certainly in ways finding ways by which you can just embrace some of the things that may not have been opportunities in the past.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up reskilling yourself, because I've had 4 or 5 people send me this information. There are 415 courses that you can take from Ivy League schools online now, right? There are companies making things available to people because they realize, schools, I guess I should say, making things available to people because they realize this is a challenge. What I struggle with is finding a way to, it's very easy sometimes to get lost in business speak, right? It's very easy to get lost in the idea that, well, it's like the old schoolhouse rock thing, right? Debits, credits, collateral, right? It's very easy to get tied up in that. And sometimes I think that's a defense mechanism to avoid talking about the human cost. But I have people who are friends of mine who are not in the same industry, and they're being affected already, and they're asking me, what should I do? What should I do? And I'm struggling to find those connections beyond being just a good human being and saying, hey, take care of yourself, focus on health right now. I think one of the questions I want to try to find answers to over the next 10, 12 weeks, however long this goes on, is what comes next? What's the next thing after this? Because it will end. At some point, it will plateau, it will end, and we will come out of this. But prepping people, I don't even know what I said there, prepping people to be able to navigate what's going on, I think is so important. And so you talked about finding talent in places that people might not normally look. Walk me through some of your ideas behind that, and what that actually means to you, and how would an employer know where to go get those people? What would be the things that they could do, regardless of size, or medium-sized company, whatever it is, that they can do to begin to open up those talent pools and look for people who are maybe out of the norm from what they would normally do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think there are a number of different things you can do, and one is just looking at the basic fundamental attributes that make people succeed in your business, and making sure that the people that you recruit and attract do represent that, and then obviously then you can go from that talent pool and select folks. So just before the current context, one of the things that we've seen was that a lot of organizations have gone on record and they said, well, we don't recruit for a college degree anymore, because our jobs do not require a college degree. Jamie Dimon, for instance, at JP Morgan, very publicly said that something to the order of 75% of the jobs at JP Morgan do not require a college degree anymore.
Ginny Rometty said the exact same thing when they were beginning to talk about reskilling and upskilling at IBM. She was like, we're beginning to look in completely different places.
Exactly. And I think the main thing there is just that people bring capability to work that could be molded or fit into any context. And I think if you have a workforce that has those basic attributes, of curiosity, of focusing on learning, having a growth mindset, and being adaptable, but still have some skills that are applicable to your context, you can have a very, very malleable workforce and folks who will perform really well in your context. Obviously, you're going to need skills, you're going to need technical acumen, but I think if you take that lens or that perspective that you can look at very basic human attributes and see what drives success in your context, odds are you can cast the net much, much wider than you have before. And you could potentially source talent in places where you never have looked for it before. And I think that really is the essence of it. It's just being able to look in places where you just traditionally wouldn't have looked for talent.
It's weird because when we were doing our prep for this conversation, one of the things that you mentioned was don't try to predict the future, and all right. Because you'll get it wrong, right? And how true is that? This is such a fluid and unpredictable situation. It's unlike anything anybody that is in the heart of their career right now has ever seen, right? I mean, the last big pandemic, yes, we've had, I think the statistic I saw was that we had 5 pandemics over the course of from 2000 to now, some of them clearly more lethal than others. But it's really, you have to go back to 1917, 1918 to the Spanish flu to really see anything where there's kind of a direct correlation. And I wonder now if we respond based on the news cycle more so than the reality. I think that has the ability to kind of amp up how people are looking at this. And I think it's got a lot of people out there saying, well, I think this is going to happen, or this is going to happen. I just don't think we know that. Okay, so kind of back to business here for a second. When you look at what's going on right now and how organizations are responding to this, and I'm just scrolling through my notes here. When you think about that, how does digital readiness play into this? This is truly a disruption, right? But how does digital readiness and technological disruption play into what's going on right now?
Well, I think that's a great question. One of the key trends that we've now obviously seen, like we touched on earlier, is this virtualization of work, or virtual working is becoming sort of the new norm very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And if you think about becoming a virtual worker, it's not so much about having the technology skills to be a virtual worker, but again, it's a mindset, right? So being able to still be satisfied, be able to still be switched on, still be able to do your work, but just in a new context. And I think that really is the essence of what it means to be digitally ready. It's still being able to communicate, and still being able to collaborate, and still being able to do the things that you normally do within your daily work, but just in a different kind of a context. And I think that's really what lies at the heart of digital readiness. And really, it's a notion of adaptability and being able to learn, and being able to for lack of a better term, just roll with the punches in terms of what technology is bringing along. And I think digital readiness from my perspective is less so about skills than it is mindset. It's being able to embrace the technology in its ever evolving form, and being able to work with it. And the reason I say that is not just, within the context of what we're talking about now, but if we look at the importance of skills in the workplace, there's quite a bit of research out there that indicates that the technical skills have a pretty short half-life. Adobe even came out now about 2 years ago, where they said that a hard skill has a half-life of about 5 years. So if you imagine what that means for a college graduate, as you walk out of the university, and the hard skills that you've learned, whether it be something like Python or any other coding language, the practical utility and value of that skill set will be much reduced 5 years down the road. And then what you need to do then as an individual is then find a way to continually learn, upskill your hard skills that you have. And again, I think that mindset of focusing on learning and adapting, that's really what resides at the core of digital readiness in my mind.
It's interesting because when we started this conversation, we talked about 3 different levels, right, of impact. There's a strictly purely human impact. And I think that is driven by anxiety, uncertainty. I don't think we do well as humans. I think we like very predictable things that we can say, this is what's going to happen, here's how it's going to happen, right? I think business responds that way. We like very predictable things. The market hates unpredictability. Part of the reason the gains have been wiped out is because no one knows what's going on, and the federal government's response was at best meh, right? it seemed like they weren't really prepared for this. And I'm not going to get into a political tirade, because I know there are people out there watching this who their political beliefs are going to be in different places than mine are. Having said that, there is a worker impact to this, and there is an opportunity, I think, and I think that's part of what we're talking about, to use this to your advantage. I know that sounds crazy in the middle of this. I know that right now people are worried about, am I going to have enough toilet paper? Am I going to have enough water, right? What happens if the social infrastructure were to break down, right? I think that there are people out there who are thinking about this. But I do think that in order to navigate something like this, you have to have a mindset that allows you to see that at some point there will be an end to this. You have to take every precaution you can to be healthy. In my own family, we're doing it right now. We are locked down. We're not going anywhere. Nobody's going out. We're wearing masks when we do go out and gloves. I walked into a grocery store today and somebody looked at me like I was going to rob the joint. It was really kind of a weird feeling, but you have to take those precautions. But you also have to be able to look at this and go, okay, what am I going to do when it's over? And from your standpoint, what are you telling your clients? Here's what you need to be ready to do when it's over. And how could you translate that down to workers and human improvement and the human impacts of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, one of the things we're chatting with a lot of our clients about is how work will change. So work will change in one way or the other. And that will then just naturally lead to changes in how people will engage with their work. And now is the moment to start thinking about, well, how can you build that resilience into your workforce?
Right.
And I think one of the core elements too that we talk to our clients a lot about are what are those pivotal roles today that will help you facilitate the change that you need to see for tomorrow, and not just within the scope of everything related to coronavirus, but outside of that as well. It's like, well, what are the core roles in your organization that can really move the needle in terms of where you need to go strategically, and then really focusing on supporting and developing those folks that are in those roles or helping people to attain those roles, I think is critically important as well. So translating that to our current situation, I think just coming back to the main point that the nature of work will change, and we're going to need folks to really make those changes happen for us. What organizations should be doing now is really supporting folks to be able to make those changes, making the pathways to getting into those business critical roles very easy, and then certainly facilitating and backing it up with meaningful action, whether it be related to benefits or rewards. My dog absolutely agrees as well.
Okay, that may be the best thing that's ever happened to me in an interview. That's hysterical. What kind of dog is that?
She's a German Shepherd.
Wow, what a noise.
I gotta tell you, she may well be the world's coolest dog. She spent 5 years as an ERD dog in Afghanistan, so she's amazing.
Wow.
But I think she just saw a squirrel and
it happens to me. It's like squirrel, right?
Well, apologies there for my dog. I think she was violently agreeing with what I was saying. But yeah, I think just to summarize, I think really the critical thing at this stage is making sure that folks are supported to get into whatever the future of work will be looking like, and I think just based out of my experience with work that I've done with clients and things like large-scale agile transformations, where we've looked at reskilling individuals who are traditional project managers to become agile project managers. Sure. We've seen that most folks have that behavioral thumbprint. They have the mindset to be successful, but the critical thing that they need is a little bit of technical knowledge. And if I was a talent manager at an internal in an organization, I would go, well, it is way easier for me to train people in terms of technical knowledge than it is to have folks with the right mindset or source those people. So I think every organization has a tremendous internal asset that at times is underappreciated, and that's your people. So making sure that you can mobilize your people and the talent that you already have in your organization to get ready for tomorrow is absolutely critical.
Sure, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that there's so much that we could sit here and spend hour upon hour talking about. I think that there are so many implications to this, but unfortunately we're going to have to cut our time here. Hopefully we will do this again sometime under different circumstances. But I really want to thank you, Marinus, and your dog for being a part of the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Ron. I really appreciate it.
All right, pal. All right, man. You be safe and take care of yourself, okay?
Thanks. You too.
All right, everybody. That is Marinus van Driel and his dog. Coming live. He's an associate partner at Aon. Well, that's going to do it for us today. We want to thank you for taking time to join in. We know you have a lot on your mind, a lot on your plate right now. We hope that you found this episode beneficial, perhaps soothing, or at least a little bit entertaining. We want to give a big thanks to the folks, Marinus and the team over at Aon, for making this episode possible. Now, if you like what we did here today and you want to stay up to date, then like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice. Make sure to turn on the notifications. You can also connect with the show on social media, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Snapchat, or you can find me directly on LinkedIn. Next week on Monday, March 30th, Hung Lee, founder at Workspace.io and the curator of Recruiting Brain Food, joins us from London to offer his perspectives on the future of talent and the coronavirus and so much more. Till then, peace.